her name is Dr. Veronica Johnson, and she is a clinical psychologist from Bacchus Marsh, Ballarat and Great Geelong Psychology Clinics, with over 20 years experience working in schools, hospitals and private practice settings. She adopts a compassionate, collaborative and engaging approach to therapy. This approach allows for a strong connection with her clients, emphasising a space of openness and trust. She works with her clients and their loved ones to assess the problems they are facing to implement individualised, evidence-based treatment plans that encourage her clients to live more fulfilling and meaningful lives. After a personal experience with loss, Veronica's passion grew for working with people in the midst of traumatic life events and those experiencing grief and loss. She has confidence and belief in an individual's capacity to find purpose in the midst of increased distress when faced with things they can't change. And we're so happy to have you here with us today, Veronica, talking about reducing the emotional stress of myeloma. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I'm going to hand over to you if you're happy to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone for joining me. I think this is a little bit unnatural for me in terms of a presentation style, because I usually like to have people engaged and responding to me and sort of asking questions. So if any questions come up along the way and you want to ask them, please sort of send them in, and I will also leave my contact details for people that might want to do that at the end. But otherwise, it's just going to be me and my voice for the next little while. So I suppose, part of the things that I do want to talk about, though, I'd really encourage you to be reflecting on your own situations throughout it. So you might want to have a notepad or a pen and just sort of writing some things down, or, sort of putting the diagrams out for yourself, just to really bring in some and tie in some of the things that I'm talking about to your own personal situation. So I'd really like to talk to you today partly about the role that a psychologist can play as part of your care team, as well as some of the key things that can really play a major part in helping you reduce that emotional stress and psychological stress that is present throughout your journey. So the idea of the presentation and thinking about sort of reducing the emotional weight, I don't want to take away the emotions, like the idea that these difficult emotions are present, like they're present for a reason, and it's because we're dealing with something in our life that we can't change, and it's really uncomfortable. So we're not going to try to delete those emotions or take them away. We just sort of want to hold them a little more gently. And there's ways that we can relate to our emotions that give us, and our experience, that can really give us a chance to act differently and continue to live a life that's really purposeful and meaningful. So I'm going to focus on a few different areas today. I think that there's multiple areas that we could focus on, but with speaking with some people in the community last year, it seemed to be that these three things were really pertinent and related to people that I was talking with. So I thought I'd focus on these today. One of them is that mind-body connection that we can't escape. The other one is how to take some power back in a situation where you can feel particularly powerless, and also navigating that change of identity that comes about when we receive a diagnosis or when we're trying to manage like a chronic health condition. And lastly, I'll just sort of touch on how you can access mental health support if that's something that you're wanting to do following this. So firstly, if our body's under physical strain, then the presence of psychological stress is just inevitable. So we might feel a range of emotions: stress, anger, sadness, uncertainty, confusion, fear, overwhelm. And we might skip between these really quickly, and we might sit in some more comfortably than others. But ultimately, when our body is undergoing something or going through an experience that's really difficult, then the illness doesn't just sit there. It absolutely creates that stress and impacts our mind as well. What we know is that our brain is like, its number one job is to help us try and survive. So if we've got something that's threatening us in a physical sense, then our brain is not going to allow us to tap into the emotional side because it's just too much and it might overwhelm us. So what we often do is we'll disconnect our emotional experience from our physical experience. And it's sort of necessary, because when your body is undergoing that and you're trying in sort of survival mode, is we can't bring in all that emotion as well because it is too much. So we cut it off so we can survive physically. But it's sort of like holding the ball under the water. Now, normally I'd demonstrate this, so we'll see how I go on the screen. But if you sort of imagine yourself with like a beach ball or a basketball, and you're trying to hold it underneath the water. Now, most of us have done this in our lives where we're really trying to hold it down, and you're looking at the ball and you've got to struggle with it, and the ball's trying to come back up, and the more that you're holding it down, the more it's trying to come back up, and it's slippery. And meanwhile, while you're just focusing so much on this ball, your family, your friends, people that you care about, it's all happening over there, but you just can't be in there because you're really struggling with this thing. And the minute that you stop focusing on it, the ball shoots up and it comes up to the top. And I actually had a client once, it was an adolescent client, and he said, well, when my ball comes up, like it hits my whole family in the face, like it really shoots back quite violently. So if we're starting to think about this holding the ball under the water, like our own difficult feelings, if our brain's going to shut off our emotions from our body, except just like holding the ball under the water, at some point, those emotions are going to come back to the surface. And sometimes it's when we least expect it. And sometimes it comes back quite powerfully and, hits our whole family in the face as such. While we're in that moment trying to survive, as I said, it can become necessary. But what we want to do in time is we want to just let the ball float on the surface. It means that we can see it. It means that it's sort of uncomfortable, and it might even sort of knock into us, and it's really present. But we can choose to look towards it, and we can also choose to move away from it. And we can also choose to go and engage with our family, with our friends that are over there doing the things that it's really meaningful and important to us. So if we can continue to sort of think about our feelings in that space, that even though they're not front of mind, even though we might have this disconnect, is that they're still there, and they're very present, and they're still impacting us. And with that, we can't necessarily go around them. We have to go through them at some point. So how do we do that without them becoming completely overwhelming to the point that we sort of lose focus of what is important to us? Okay. Just going to flick through to the next stage. If you've got any questions, I said, please ask them and we can come back to them at the end. One of the things that becomes really apparent in any situation where something in our life's happening and we can't change it. We're not in control of it. And it doesn't matter what we do and what we try, we actually can't change this thing that is changing our life. It leaves us feeling really powerless. And in terms of your journey, I'm sure there are many aspects of treatment, many aspects of the progression of your illness that just leave you feeling powerless. And feeling powerless is a really, really challenging place to be. When our mind and body try to block out our experience of things, like we were talking about in the last slide, and when we feel like we have no power, our brains go into that problem-solving mode and they search for a solution. They try to find everything they can to fix this problem. So what's going on here? I need to fix it. Something has to change because I'm not okay. You know, our brain protects us. If I'm cold right now, my brain says, go and shut the door. If I'm hungry, my brain says, go and eat. If my computer is broken, it says, go and contact the repairman. It's got a solution for everything. But what about when we don't have a solution to the problem? Our brain, we try to start to control everything. And not only everything that's related to the problem. So some things that we try and control might be quite helpful to us. We might try and control our diet. We might try and control having some semblance of routine. We might try and control some of the treatment that we choose to engage in, the recommended activity that we do. But when we start to try to control things that aren't related to the problem, it can become quite unhelpful. And also trying to control things that we actually don't have any control over. We might try to control the people around us, what they do, how they feel, their reactions to things. We might try and control the way that we feel and control the times that we feel. We might try and control the things that happen to us. It's sort of useful, you know, it can be useful to tap into this area and think, well, what can I do right now? But if we get stuck in this space, it can be really unhelpful. So there's merit in taking power back when we feel completely powerless, but not in trying to control everything, because there's so many things that we can't control. You know, think about the weather, for instance, or the fact that there's a global pandemic. Like, there are always things that we can't control. So we have to sort of decide, where do we want to focus our energy? And particularly if we're sort of feeling lower in energy and lower in motivation, we want to make sure that we're pinpointing the things where we're going to get like the most bang for our buck, I suppose, the things that are going to really bring about sustained change. So here's where I'd normally have you with a pen and paper and thinking about your own situation. And this is something that we call the circle of control. So in the middle of the diagram here, and if you wanted to do it for yourself, I would really encourage you to. So I'll sort of talk through this slowly in case there is anyone that wants to have a go at this, or even if you take this away and sort of think about it more from your own point of view, or even you and your loved ones around what are things you can control and what are things that you can't. We've got the circle in the middle here. And this sort of represents the things that are actually within your control. So some of the things that I thought of is, well, you can control what you eat. You know, you can choose what food you make, what you choose to consume. You can also choose what information you consume, because I know, like we alluded to my experience in the intro, but I know when I was sort of in hospital and dealing with this huge big thing that I couldn't change, is the nurses used to joke that I was getting my doctorate in it, because I would just sit up and just read and read and read and read and read. But we need to be really careful about how much information we consume and what information we consume. How you communicate with other people, the words you choose to use, where you communicate, what you communicate. How you spend your time and who you spend your time with, where you choose to focus your attention, who you have within your care team. All of those things are absolutely within your control. Now, outside of the circle, there's some things here that we can't control, but definitely play on our mind and definitely try to pull our attention away. The changes that happen to our body, the fact that we have an illness, changes to our libido, changes to our physical appearance, other people's behaviors, your capacity to do the things that you used to do or the things that are important to you, other people's reactions, any sort of treatment outcomes, the toxicity of the medication, other people's feelings. We want to check in outside of the circle, but if we get stuck out there, it can really cause us that increased distress. And what I would almost imagine you doing is, it's like if you notice there's high distress in your life at this point, just consider if you're maybe stuck outside of this circle, stuck focusing your attention on all of these things that are actually outside of your control. Because at any minute, you can actually choose to step back into that circle in the middle. And sometimes it's even useful to do it, like actually step. Go, I'm going to step outside of this space because things are unsettling. So what, and focus again on what else I can control and spend my time there. These are sort of generic things. I want you to think in your life, like what else could you maybe add to this? On either what you can control or what you can't control. Something that that's really striking to me is, and probably not something that we overtly focus on or think about in our life, is who we are, how we see ourselves. And I think when we're faced with something in our life that's life-changing, is we might not realize just the impact that it has to that stable idea of who we are. And when we have to integrate an illness into that identity, it's a huge process. And it takes time, and it takes a lot of self-care and compassion, and it takes a lot of patience. Before diagnosis, if you think about what might you have identified as in your life, it might have been wrapped up in what you did for work, in certain hobbies that you might have been engaged in, a role that you played in the family, maybe being a certain type of friend or having a certain personality. The way we view ourselves actually influences how we interact with other people and how we interact in the world around us. Now, some of those ways of viewing yourself and your identity, they might hold true, and you might still feel like that person. But some of them might not. And some of them might be completely thrown into turmoil after a diagnosis or during your treatment journey. So if your view of yourself changes, how do you now interact with the world around you as this person? Changes your relationship dynamics. Maybe it might change your work. It might change your capacity to engage in things that you've previously done. And that can really leave you feeling very alone and very lost. If we think about that connection to ourself and our self-identity and our self-worth as being something that keeps us quite stable, you know, when there's like this emotional storm sort of around us, it's like our anchors dropped because we know who we are and how we manage these situations. If your identity is not on that stable space, and there's lots of change and and you're feeling quite unsure, unsettled, quite on edge with that, or fragile, and it's going to change your ability to engage in the world around you and with people. And that's okay. But I think it's something that we struggle a lot with. We struggle a lot with that change. So what do we do about it? We need to try and connect with others with similar journeys. Share our story. Maybe work closely with a professional to continue finding your purpose. finding purpose in the midst of this constant change and uncertainty. And when you find your purpose and you find what's important to you, because there's always things that are important to us. They might be different to what they were a month ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. But when we keep connected to what's important to us and what brings us meaning and purpose in our lives, then we can feel more grounded, we can feel less alone, and we can sort of make sense of things a little better. The real power lies in understanding how we can live with something that you can't actually change, but continue to find purpose and meaning in your life. At this point, a lot of my clients might say to me, I have no idea what's important to me. Like, I don't know what that is. There's lots of different things that you can use to sort of think this through. You know, you can think of sort of role models or the things in your day where you feel the most connected. But there are also tools online that you can use as well. And I'm not sure how we get this to people, but this is quite a good one. It's just like a card sort where you can just go into it and you have a look at each one and you basically say, is this very important to me? Is this not important to me at all? Or is this a bit important to me? And you move things along and you think about, and it really gives you a sense of reflective space around, you know, is support important to me? Is knowledge important to me? And it just helps you think about what might be, I guess, things that you really want to focus on and bring into your world as much as possible at that time. So it can help us have a sort of a connecting point and help rediscover who we are a bit at the moment. So, we're really just scratching at the surface here of, little tidbits of information for you to take away, and hopefully something has resonated. Hopefully something feels like it's useful. But what you can do is, like, psychologists, counselors, any sort of mental health clinicians can help in this space. They can help with those difficult emotions that arise. They can help us sort of bring together that mind-body connection and allow both experiences to be there together. They can help understand change to your identity. We didn't really touch on it, but effectively communicating with loved ones and sort of noticing what you might be trying to control in each other and for each other, and how to talk about things, what words, what language to use. Things that you might be avoiding within those communication channels. And lastly, they can really help you connect with what's valuable in your life, what's important to you, and making sure that becomes a focus point while you're dealing with something that you can't change. We've already mentioned our clinics. There's Bacchus Marsh, Greater Geelong and Ballarat that we've got clinicians at that can help if people want one-to-one support. We have telehealth sessions as well. To be able to access support, you don't have to do anything. You can just call up. You can just pop an inquiry in through the websites, but you can also go to your GP and get a chronic disease management plan, and that actually gives you access to some Medicare subsidised sessions. So if you're feeling like that's something you want to do, you can talk to your care team about that. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it and see if there's any questions.
It was really interesting, and I really appreciated your delivery, giving people in the community the chance to really consider and think about some of the things that you were talking about, specifically the circle of control, which I think is so important and something that that people in our community could really make use of. With myeloma, it can be something that, and we hope that people will live for a very long time with it. And so with the ebbs and flows that can come with being on treatment or being on maintenance, there are periods of time where you are feeling that distress, and then times when you're not as much, but having something that sort of triggers you to remember about the circle of control and the things that you can control and the things that you can't. It's really useful.
It's I think the language that we use is really important too, because we can often find ourselves, and our brain will always do this, is takes us to what we can't do. I can't do that. I can't do that. And a shift in, okay, that might be the case right now, but what can you do? And we can start to focus on, well, I can do this, I can do that. So I can have myeloma and still, I can be undergoing treatment and still. Yeah,
definitely. The other thing that a lot of people living with myeloma have as a situation is that they're often on steroid therapy, which keeps them awake, and often they will spend many late nights lying in bed awake, full of distress, worrying, unable to calm down. Could you just, off the top of your head, come up with any or offer some strategies that could help people that are living with that at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the night times are the hardest times because, we don't have the distractions of the world during the day. So we often have our own thoughts. And I guess right now we have access to information as well on our phones. And when I was mentioning before is that I would absolutely be up all night, just delving into the, down rabbit holes that are scientific articles about what I was managing, trying to find answers. I think that whenever we find ourselves very much caught up in our thoughts and caught up in that space of our brains becoming problem solvers, is we have to try and then come back into our body. And so we, funnily enough, we call it sort of like dropping anchor techniques, so we can steady ourselves. And sometimes when things feel like they're the biggest, we search for big answers. And it's often when the smallest things become the most important. So that like one long, slow breath. Or even, I know, like sometimes I just like hug a pillow and sort of have that, where you actually tense your muscles up and really hug the pillow and then, and let it out. So those sort of techniques, sometimes things like some white noise. So having some sleep music on that just means that our brain sort of goes into a different space and has that on in the background, or some people put podcasts on or things like that. That can all be really useful. I guess the other part of sleep is sort of recognizing it's really normal for our sleep to be disturbed sometimes when there's certain medications and things. And if we fight against it all the time, then we end up pairing bed with distress and discomfort. And so I would say if you're sort of awake for more than like 20 minutes, we'd actually just recommend sort of hopping up, doing some light stretching or a little bit of reading until you're sleepy again, and then turning the light back off.
These are great tips. It's really good.
Yeah, there's some cool, if you go actually on our website, there's in the resources section, any of the clinic websites, there's a sleep article there. And it gives some really great tips on sort of sleep hygiene type things that can be useful. So try all of those. But if you find that those things aren't working, it might be worthwhile sort of talking to the medical team as well around anything else that they suggest.
Yeah, that's great. And I probably just mentioned that if you're happy, I'm happy to share through our email service the links to your site from today, and also those value cards that you mentioned as well. We can share that link to anybody who's interested, so you can just email the nurse's inbox, and I'll give you those details at the end. We are right on time, but I did want to ask one more question that's come in from one of our viewers today, and her name's Donna, and she wants to ask, I think, a really important question, which is it important to always stay positive in front of children?
Yeah, it's such a huge question, and my background's in teaching, and I do a lot of child psychology, so I feel reasonably equipped to answer this. So thank you for asking me something, Donna, that I feel like's within my wheelhouse. I think talking to children about things is particularly particularly difficult, and probably something that I would suggest most adults try and avoid. We find it really, really hard to see people we love in distress and upset. So we'll often try to not talk to the children, not show distress, not show sadness. It differs developmentally. Because we're talking about, obviously, when we talk about children, we could be talking about, sort of 2, 3, 4-year-olds right up to sort of 17, 18-year-olds. So I don't know if there's just generic advice that I can give. It also would depend on the child's ability to cognitively understand what's going on. If you've got younger children that understand that something's happening, they can often cognitively process something before they can emotionally process it. And so our job becomes to help them with the emotion processing of it, because otherwise they sit with high anxiety. And you'll see, and they can show that through like big behaviors like anger, upset, but they can also show it just by becoming withdrawn and avoiding things themselves and becoming more anxious. In terms of staying positive, I like to suggest to stay real. And, there's nobody in the history of the world that's managed to only have happiness and joy and all the good emotions in their life and avoid all the difficult things. So I think it's absolutely okay to be real. And if you are feeling sad, if you are feeling worried about something, it's all right to own that and to model that, because what you probably will find is that the child's probably feeling that too and doesn't know how to express it. And so there's some really cool things on emotion coaching. The Gottman Institute do one, and it's really about, if we sort of have to normalize the feeling. So we might say, gee, I'm feeling really sad today. Today's feeling like a bit of a hard day, and I'm noticing that I'm not really wanting to do much because I'm feeling really sad. Do you ever have days like that where you feel like that? So sort of really acknowledging and normalizing the feeling, and saying, and then validating it. It's okay. It's okay that we all have days like this. Can we work it out together? What we might do? I'm feeling a bit sad. Maybe we might go and sit outside and have some, get some fresh air and sit under the tree, or maybe we might take the dog for a walk. That might make us feel a bit better. Put something on the TV. So look up emotion coaching. If you want to send me an email, even because it is a really hard question to answer. Like if we're talking about a 5-6-year-old compared to a 13-14-year-old, we will deal with it differently. But developmentally appropriate language. Don't feel like you always have to be positive. Be real. I think we don't give them enough. I don't think we don't give kids enough credit for what they can actually manage. And we certainly don't want to feed into their avoidance of difficult feelings, because that's holding their ball under the water for them.
Yeah, you really are, as a parent, modeling behaviors that are acceptable. And so you're absolutely right. And it does need to be age appropriate too. So it is hard to speak to that question, because children change so much from being really little to being teenagers and into adults.
Yeah. The other thing I would tie back into is that I think when we try and predict how someone else is going to respond, then we're actually trying to control other people around us. And we can obviously influence other people around us by thinking about good times to talk about things, how we talk about things, how we respond after we do. But, space for questions, space for those emotions, space for talking about it and validating is always the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely true. I'm sad to say that we've run out of time, and I feel like I could probably ask you questions all afternoon.
That's okay.
I wanted to just say thank you so much for giving your time today and coming and speaking about something that is, I think, really, really important in the myeloma community. So thank you very much.
That's okay. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, if there are any other questions like that, I'm more than happy to continue to answer them or send some resources through if you need to, for you to disseminate.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for that.
That's okay. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
Bye.